This here is my fracture management OSCE. Before I begin, I'm going to explain the procedure to the patient as well as gaining his or her consent. When I start, I'm going to expose the injury as well as having another limb to compare it to. What we've got is a suspected right tibia fracture. So I'm going to assess the injury by getting a history from the patient of how it happened, as well as using the +DISC acronym, which is pain, loss of function, unusual movement, swelling, deformity, any irregularity or shortening in the bone, crepitus and shock, just to help me determine the injury. I'm also going to assess for cardiovascular and any neurological integrities, which is checking a cap refill and comparing it to the other limb. I'm going to check for any pedal pulses, also comparing that and checking for sensation of both feet. I'm also going to assess a pain score out of 10 from the patient, and then I'll provide the treatment as needed. Alright, so I've got a pain score of 8 from our patient here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to administer a drug called methoxyfluorine, which is an inhaled analgesic. It's self-administered, so the patient just has to breathe it in. Contradictions can include renal impairment, a family history of malignant hypothermia, and or if he's unable to obey commands. So I'm just going to do a drug check here, which is in date, and I'm going to give my offside to Shawnee. Could you just double check that it is in date?
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Alright, so I'm just going to place that in here. So the patient can just breathe that as required while I do the splint. So I'm just going to place a box splint on you, and how I'm going to do that is I'm going to use this as well as 2 triangle bandages. Shawnee, if you could just hold the patient's leg up, and so I can put the box splint on. When I place the splint, I'm going to put the triangle bandages above and below the actual fracture, or the bone. Pop that like that. I'll slide this in. Please lift it up again. Just tie this on. Alright, thank you. When I tie this part, I'm going to do a figure 8. So like so, just so the bone is nicely secured, and I can compare it to the non-injured bone, also checking again for any neurological or cardiovascular integrities, which is also checking again for cap refills on both feet, testing sensation, looking at the patient, and also checking for pedal pulses. This here is my hemorrhage control OSCE. Before we begin, what we want to do is exposing the wound like so. You can also cut the patient's clothes off, but you also want consent first. Next thing what we want to do is we want to clean the wound with the saline solution if we need to. After that, you want to get a bandage and get the most smallest bandage you can, just so it provides a maximum amount of pressure. After that, what you want to do is you want to bandage over the area, twisting and turning it, just so it provides more pressure to the area. Alright, once the bandage is dressed, if blood starts to leak through, we can apply another bandage on top of the existing one. It's also important to check for colour, sensation, warmth, and also a distal pulse, ensuring that the dressing is not too tight. If bleeding is not controlled, you can apply a tourniquet 10 centimeters proximal to the wound, like so, and tightening it on a single bone limb. Tighten the windlass until the patient stops bleeding or a distal pulse disappears, and you can document the time as required when you place the tourniquet, and ensure that the tourniquet is visible, and you can also apply a second tourniquet on the patient if needed. This here is my oxygen administration OSCE. This is the oxygen cylinder. We know it's an oxygen cylinder because the whole cylinder is either white or black. This piece here is a regulator. It has a gauge that indicates how much oxygen is left. Over here is the flow meter. Oxygen is measured in liters per minute. This one has a maximum of 15. This part here is the Botox seal. A faulty Botox seal could indicate a leakage with the tank. To place the regulator back onto the pillar, you align the 3 holes with the 3 prongs, like so. And then you can do a quarter turn just to make it loose. Uses for oxygen can include respiratory distress, TBI, smoke inhalation and shock. And risks for using the oxygen is O2 or oxygen aids in combustion. So when we use the oxygen tank, we lie it flat so it doesn't move around or explode. So I'm just going to use a bag valve mask and reservoir for the patient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach the oxygen tubing to the regulator. I'll turn on the oxygen and place it on at 15 liters per minute. We can see that the reservoir bag will slowly start to inflate. In this case, we don't have a lot of oxygen left, so it most likely won't inflate. So before doing this, it's always good to ask for the patient's consent. So I'm just going to place the bag valve mask over you just to help you with breathing. So I'll ventilate him as needed to. With certain masks, you can actually increase the flow rate, and it's a good idea to always turn the oxygen on before you actually place it or place the mask on the patient. When that's done, you can turn the oxygen off, and you can bleed the tank by turning off the top of the pillar and putting the flow rate all the way back on so the oxygen is fully bled and depleted. This is my bag valve mask OSCE. Just to begin, I'm going to place the position with a head tilt chin lift position like so. Then I'm going to place an OPA in the patient's mouth. To measure it, I'll use it from the corner of the patient's mouth to the mandible, placing it 180 degrees towards the roof of the patient's mouth. Then doing a 180 degree turn so it sits there like so. Then I'll begin constructing the bag valve mask, placing the filter in on this side like so, with the patient's side facing outwards, which is then connected to the mask. On the opposite end we have the reservoir bag, which is connected to the oxygen tubing like so, which is then connected to our oxygen tank. For the bag valve mask, we use a flow rate of 15 liters a minute, and you should be able to see the reservoir bag inflating, but we don't have any oxygen, so you won't be able to see that. When ventilating the patient, we use the C and E grip like so, and when we ventilate, you ventilate once every 5 to 8 seconds, assessing for chest rise. If you start to see gastric inflation, you can apply cricoid pressure. For basic airway management, we can use adjuncts such as an NPA or an OPA, as well as using a head tilt chin lift position like so, while placing a towel behind the patient's neck. What this does is it helps maintaining a good airway position, as well as preventing the patient's tongue from falling back into the oropharynx. To measure an OPA, you want to measure it by placing it by the corner of the patient's mouth to the corner of the mandible. And when putting it inside the patient's mouth, you want to invert it, putting it towards the patient's roof of his mouth, or his or her mouth, and inverting it, doing a 180 degree turn so it sits just behind the patient's tongue. What this does is it sits between the teeth, preventing the jaw from clenching, and it acts like a bite block, and it also maintains an open airway. Complications that could arise whilst using an OPA is damage to the oropharynx, induced vomiting if the OPA is too large, and reasons for using an OPA is if the patient has a GCS less of 8 or scoring less than 2 for the verbal response. Another airway adjunct we can use is an NPA, which stands for nasopharyngeal airway. To measure it, you want to measure it from the nostril to the corner of the mandible, and before inserting it, you want to lubricate it with a water-based lubricant like so. And whilst inserting it, you want to insert it directly into the patient's nostril, ideally the bigger of the 2 nostrils, and just place it in like so. If any resistance is encountered, you can twist it at a 180 degree angle, and all the way until the nostril sits flush with the flange. Benefits of using an NPA is that they do not induce vomiting and can be placed in a patient with a high GCS score, as well as patients with trismus. Complications can include epistaxis or nasal polyps, as well as it could be contraindicated in the setting of a TBI, which is a traumatic brain injury. This here is our lateral suction unit. When using it, you want to place the patient in a lateral recovery position. To test the suction device, you want to turn it on, include the pipe, and make sure it reaches 300 to 500 millimeters of mercury. If no suction pressure is generated, you'd like to test the device for any leakages or any battery faults, etc. Once the primary suction test is done, you want to test it again by blocking the end of the catheter as well as placing your finger here just to create suction. When using it on a patient, you want to enter the oropharynx and use it in a circular motion for a maximum of 10 seconds, only suctioning outwards. Complications whilst using the suction device can include induction of bradycardia, hypoxia, induced vomiting, and some soft tissue trauma. That's why it's very important not to use the rigid catheter in a moving vehicle. When applying a cervical collar, you want to utilize the Nexus criteria as well as the Canadian C-spine rule. Indications for patients who might warrant a collar can include no evidence of intoxication, posterior midline cervical spine tenderness, which you can palpate for, a normal level of alertness being 5 out of 5 on the GCS's verbal score, neurological deficit causing decreased sensation to other parts of the body such as toes and fingers, and also no painful or distracting injuries. Before applying a cervical collar, you want to explain the procedure to the patient as well as gaining the patient's consent. You also need a second person to help stabilize the head. So Shawnee, if you get us help putting the patient's head into neutral alignment. To measure a collar, you want to start from the clavicle to the base of the chin. So from what I can see, that would be about short. Right. And what I've done is it's a good idea to actually pre-bend the collar itself, just so it helps with placing it on the patient. Like so. Okay. Collars only reduce a small amount of movement, so until the patient is fully secured, it's always a good idea for you or your colleague to continue holding the head. My vital signs OSCE, I'm going to start off by doing a radial pulse on Shawnee here, testing for strength and regularity. Typically in a normal heart rate it's between 60 to 100 beats a minute, and I'm going to test it for 15 seconds, then timesing it by 4. Shawnee, is it okay if I can do some vital signs on you?
Yeah, it's fine.
Sure, I'm just going to get you a radial pulse. Okay, so I'm going to do this for 15 seconds. So I've just got 18 beats a minute in the last 15 seconds, so timesing that by 4 is 72 beats per minute, so Shawnee falls between the normal range of a normal heart rate. So the next vital sign we're going to be doing is the respiratory rate. It's important not to tell the patient because they can end up changing their rate of breathing. So Shawnee, if you could just place your hand on your shoulder so I can just take another pulse. And this time I'll feel for 10 seconds. Alright, thanks Shawnee. In that 10 seconds I counted 3 breaths a minute, which I'll times by 6, which will give me 18 breaths a minute. That falls between the normal respiratory rate of 12 to 20 breaths a minute. Alright, the next vital sign we're going to do is blood pressure. So to start that off, we need to ask for the patient's consent. So Martin, is it okay if I can take your blood pressure?
Yes, that's okay.
Alright, thanks mate. So you're just going to feel a bit of tightness around your arm over here. Okay, so to start that process off, we're going to start by removing or sort of removing any restrictive part of the patient's clothing. So I'm just going to wrap up his t-shirt like so, just so we've got a good area to put the blood pressure cuff. And then next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place the blood pressure cuff like so, wrapping it around Martin's arm. How does that feel, Martin? That's all good?
No, it's all good.
Alright. So after this I'm going to feel for Martin's brachial pulse. This is usually it is located towards the medial side of his arm, so I can feel that. Right, let's pop this here. Okay, so I'm going to inflate the blood pressure cuffs till I can no longer feel Martin's brachial pulse, and this will give me a rough indication of Martin's systolic pressure. Okay. Next thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the stethoscope and place it on the same area of where I found Martin's brachial pulse. and that's what I'm gonna use to assess his systolic blood pressure. So I'm gonna inflate the blood pressure cuff again, slowly releasing the stopper valve until I can start to hear the heart sounds. This will indicate our systolic pressure. And when I can no longer hear any more noises, this will indicate Martin's diastolic pressure. Alright, what I got there, Martin was about 130 over 90 millimeters of mercury, so that's a little bit higher than our normal values or our normal range of 120 over 80. Typically, systolic over 140 or diastolic over 90 millimeters of mercury indicates hypertension. Before approaching a scene, we want to make sure we've got our correct PPE gear, which is our gloves and our glasses, as well as the correct operational gear, which is the AED suction, response pack, and the oxygen. Alright, and as well as the radio. So before we move on to a room, we want to assess all dangers. So can't see any danger, Shawnee.
No hazards.
Alright, so we'll move on to the patient here. Hello, ambulance. Can you hear me? So the patient isn't responsive to verbal stimulus, so I'm going to give him a pain stimulus. The patient also not responding, so I'm going to look, listen and feel for 10 seconds to see if he's breathing. Assessing for chest rise also. Alright, so I can't hear if the patient's breathing at all. Shawnee, could you start compressions at a rate of 30 to 2? AT1 to comms.
AT1.
Requesting R49 patient, requesting R50 patient R49.
Copy that.
Thank you. Alright, so I'm going to start off with the defib for the patient. Placing the pads on him. Shawn, I'm just going to work around you. Alright, so turn the defib on.
Analyzing heart rhythm.
Analyzing heart rate.
Do not touch
Alright,
the
if you
patient.
just touch the patient.
Shock advised.
Alright, shocks advised.
Charging.
Staying clear.
Stay clear of patient. Deliver shock.
Alright, shocking now.
Shock delivered.
Alright, back in compressions, please, Shawnee.
4.
So I'm just going to
Start
place
CPR.
the towel under the patient's head. Alright, and I'm going to insert the OPA towards the roof of his mouth, do a 180-degree turn, just so it sits like that. And I'm going to start with ventilating the patient with the bag valve mask and reservoir. So we'll start with that. Then apply the end of the oxygen tubing to our oxygen cylinder. Right. Anyone here know the patient?
No.
Alright, that's all good. And we're going to use it at a flow rate of 15 meters a minute. Alright, Shawnee, if you can just tell me when you hit 25 compressions onwards, so I
Yep,
can ventilate the
25,
patient.
26, 27, 28, 29, 30.
Alright, so I'm going to ventilate the patient looking for chest rise, and
Yeah,
chest
good
rise.
chest rise.
Using a C and an E grip. Alright. Alright, next time the defib monitor goes on, Shawnee, what we'll do is we'll trade places towards the left,
Yep.
and then we'll trade rolls, alright?
Yep. 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30.
Chest rise and chest rise.
Yep, good
Continue.
chest rise.
Suction is also here if I need it, just right behind me.
25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30.
Alright, chest rise and chest rise.
Yep, good chest rise.
And compression, Shawnee.
25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30.
Alright, positive chest rise and positive chest rise.
Twenty-five, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30.
Stop
Alright, chest
CPR.
rise and chest rise. We'll stop to the left.
Analyzing heart rhythm. Stay clear
All
of
clear?
patient. Analyzing heart rhythm. No shock advised.
Alright, so I'll go back to compressions.
If needed, start CPR.
Right. 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Positive chest rise and positive chest rise. This here is my Defib Orientation video. I'll be doing it with the LifePack 15. To start off, we'll be opening the right pocket. This pocket has the SpO2 monitor. It also has the ET CO2 detector as well as the 3-lead ECG. On the opposite pocket, what we've got here is we've got a 12-lead ECG with connector dots. We've also got a test probe and some spare connector dots as well. So I'll take our test probe out. On the back of the LifePack, we've got some blood pressure cuffs and a spare roll of paper. We've got different size blood pressure cuffs. And this pocket here, we've got some spare ECG dots and another blood pressure cuff. To check the battery for the LifePacks, what you can do is press the two buttons. It should indicate the battery. If we need to replace it, just pull the tab and you can charge or replace the battery if needed. Click that into place, pop the tab down and fold over like so. Alright. To turn the LifePack on, you just hit the on button. It should start up in AED mode. So to change that,
Push, analyze,
we'll
connect,
hit energy
electrode.
select. And hit enter manual mode using the speed dial and hit yes, changing it to 50 joules. Alright, after we've done that, we'll go to options, hit on user test, and once the user test is in progress, it should print out the test results below. So I'll just wait for that. Alright, so the test has indicated the user test is passed. So what we'll do is we'll do a test defibrillation. So to do that, I'll apply the test probe and we'll hit charge. Be careful because this uses live energy. And shocking now, and shock's delivered. And if you want to disarm the charge while you've done it, you hit charge again, and you can hit the speed dial and the charge is disarmed. You can also check for paper from this flap below, ensuring it's full, and you can just close this tab like so. Yep. So I've just attached a 3-lead ECG to myself as well as a SpO2 monitor. By default, the LifePack shows paddles. So in order to see my ECG, we'll hit lead, scroll down to leads 2, 1 and 3, and we can see my ECG. If we want to change the amplitude, we'll scroll onto one of the leads and select the sizing as needed, pressing the home button, and you can see it's much bigger. To change our QRS volume, we'll scroll onto the heart rate, select the QRS volume and raise the volume to whatever we need. We also have the non-invasive blood pressure button here, and we can also print out an ECG by pressing print on the LifePack. Once we're done, we can just press print again and it should stop, like so. To change the LifePack back into AED mode, we just have to hit analyze,
Connect electrode.
and to turn it off, we just hold down the home button.
Hello, I'm Irfaan. Thank you for watching my video. Like, comment and subscribe.
Just to fuck. So there's my voice now. Fuck's sake. Alright, look at that.
They probably wouldn't have noticed.
Nah, it's... Oh, fuck. This here is... Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, fuck, I should have saved. Fuck, now I'm in, so timing that by 4 and 72. Oh my god! I'm the captain now.